Welcome, dear students. The focus of the current session is birth and life of a language. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to understand what does the term birth mean in relation to a language, and how does a language take birth and how does it pass through different stages of its life. Well, when we come to the origin of language, in the human species, we would find there have always been scholarly debates about that, and there have been different theories about that. In fact, there are, various theories and no consensus as such on the issue of origin of human language. Languages are thoroughly organic entities. Each one is complex in its nature, it is versatile, and each language constantly keeps on changing and growing and developing depending upon who are the users of that language. In fact, what happens is when the social, cultural, political environment and even geographical environment changes, with all these changes, there are changes in the language, because the changes in the environment change the people, the users of a language. And as the users of a language change, the language also changes, it evolves, and it has certain differences from its past. In fact, whenever there is a situation of a challenge where something new happens, there is some new need for the use of language, human beings try to counter that need, human beings try to fulfill that need. Those efforts that are made to change the language that are successful, that become a part of the language permanently, because people keep on using them repetitively and they become a part of the language. Those that are not successful, they are dropped on the way. My dear students, I would also like to clarify certain points about the term birth of a language. Well, the concept of language birth in itself is a misconception in certain ways. How is it a misconception? This birth, the birth of a language, does not involve as such any pregnancy or delivery stages, etc. What I mean by that is that, in living beings, there would be a certain period of pregnancy, which would be a period of expectation of birth, and after that there would be a stage of delivery where we would have a newborn. Though languages are also called living beings in certain ways, we say that languages are living beings, but they are different in the sense that there is no particular, time point of this delivery or birth of a new language. It is more like a stage, not a time point. In fact, changes keep on coming in a language. A new variety keeps on taking its shape and its form. And we cannot say that at a particular time point or in a particular year or, in a particular decade, a particular new language took birth. On the timeline, on the decline of time, you cannot point out a certain point for that. Any language that gets enough distinguishable features from its ancestral language gradually gets the status of a new language. So, for example, there is no particular time point that can be associated with, the emergence of creoles as separate vernaculars that they get the status of from the colonial European languages from which they originally evolved. Another important characteristic about the birth of human languages is that we cannot predict their birth. The recognition of separateness is probably the criteria, but we do not know when, in terms of divergence from the ancestral language, a language would have enough characteristics to be called a separate language. There are other issues about the life of a language as well. The issues are not only related to birth, but also how it passes through different stages. The question is, how long is the life of a language? Can the length of the time period or the life of a language be predicted or be determined? Which factors determine the life course of a language? We also do not know that. So what does it depend upon? The conclusion that we can draw is that it depends upon the people who use it, depending upon the life, depending upon the lifestyle, depending upon the needs, depending upon the environment and the context in which they use language. That would determine the length of the life of a language, and that would also determine the factors that would influence the kind of life that particular language would have.